here. Welcome to the Prosperous Empath. Oh, that's fascinating. I don't think I've ever introduced myself as Kat on the podcast. Honestly, that makes the most sense because y'all are friends now. There's so many things I want to share with you before we jump into today's conversation. I want to remind you all that registration for our brand new Emerge Mastermind for Early Entrepreneurs is still open for registration. Doors close this Friday, the 22nd. If you've been considering the program, if you have questions, if you'd like to have a conversation, we will include the link to the program guide in the show notes. And I encourage you to send me a voice memo, send me a DM, email me. Honestly, reach out through whatever channel works for you best. I'd love to chat with you further about the program. I'm so excited for it. A couple of the things that I personally am excited about for this particular program is that we have an intention to work with an intimate group of early entrepreneurs in a deeply supportive and accessible way. So this cohort is going to have access to our entire Unbounded community and network and vault of resources and trainings and information that we've compiled over the years. You'll have deep access to me and my co-coach, Laura. And we're going to be talking about so many of the fundamental principles and distinctions that not only have been my way of operating in business for the past decade, but have hands down been the standards, the values, the ways of being in business that have made all the difference for me. I love talking about business, and I love talking about business in an empathic way. I imagine you can hear my passion as I talk about it. Anyway, love to have you in the program. Love to talk with you further about it. Reach out if it feels aligned and you want to explore further. Okay, second, I want to share that I am going to be on an upcoming summit next month, as well as my guest on the podcast today. So Sarah and I will both be upcoming speakers in the HSP Awakening Virtual Summit that is going to be hosted from the 2nd to the 6th of October. It's a virtual summit over 5 days, and there will be over 25 speakers. You will recognize many of these names because several of the speakers have been former guests on the podcast. Several of them are scheduled for upcoming episodes of the podcast. And of course, today's guest on the podcast is how we actually reconnected. So I'm really excited about this summit. So many of my esteemed HSP colleagues are going to be speakers. We will include the link to register for the summit. It's completely free in the show notes. We would love to have you. And I'm particularly excited about my talk as I'm going to be exploring further the themes of rest as an act of resistance for empaths. All right, so shifting gears to our guest on today's episode, you all are in for such a treat. I have Sarah Santacroce with me on the podcast today, and I was connected with Sarah's work several years ago on Emma Louise's podcast, The Ambitious Introvert. And I actually listened to Emma interviewing Sarah, and it was one of the first podcast episodes I ever listened to, and it always stuck with me because of Sarah's authentic, down-to-earth, really approachable, and deeply knowledgeable style. And she did not disappoint. And then more recently, we reconnected via the summit. So a little bit more about Sarah. She identifies as a hippie turned business coach. She has written 2 books, hosts the Humane Marketing Podcast, and works with heart-centered entrepreneurs to question their assumptions when it comes to marketing and give them permission to market their business their way, the gentle way. It is such a deep and natural conversation between the two of us. We talk a lot about traditional marketing and why it doesn't work for people like us, why we all need a more humane marketing approach, and what that actually means for us as empaths and HSPs who are trying to thrive, not just survive in business. We explore what this looks like to market and sell humanely. And we also talk about the power of languaging and some of the phrases that Sarah has coined or renamed in her work. And one of them I want to share because even as I say it out loud, I get this visual of just an entirely different experience for those of us who are working to transform our relationship to selling. Sarah named the term the gentle sales conversation in our serene garden. Now, to hear a little bit more about what that really means, you'll have to tune into today's episode. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to share one final exciting thing that we've never done on the podcast. We are doing a book giveaway. So when you listen to today's episode, you'll hear that we talk so much about Sarah's book, Marketing Like We're Human, a radical business approach to get new clients with integrity and kindness. So much of her book resonates with me. I actually read it from cover to cover, earmarked, labeled so many pages to not only prep for the conversation, but also because the points resonate with my own value system. And so we want to give away one lucky copy of the book to a winner. So let's see. So this is a huge thank you for listening to the podcast, also to support Sarah's book. So to enter the giveaway, just leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts and then send us a DM over on Instagram or email us with your Apple username so we know to look out for the review once it's been verified, and we also know how to identify you. You have until Monday, September 25th at 12 noon Eastern Time, and then we will notify the winner and send you your copy of the book. And with that, I hope you enjoy today's conversation. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Catherine. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm feeling a little antsy because I rushed so quickly to hit record because I didn't want to say too much because I have so much I want to say to you. So I'm just going to take a breath and get grounded. But I'd love to maybe just jump in by inviting you to share your pronouns and a little bit of your story, anything that you'd like to share by way of giving my audience a felt sense of who you are.
Yeah, thank you. Pronouns. I've recently changed my pronouns on the LinkedIn profile because I saw a friend of mine, he just put, in the bracket where you're supposed to use your pronouns, he just put human in there. And I love this so much. And it's so obviously related to everything I do that I copied him. And I was like, yeah, in the end, it doesn't matter. We're all human. And so human is my new pronoun for now. And then in terms of the story, I've gone through a transformation, a journey where now instead of kind of sharing this professional story, I start with my growing up story, which, since you've read the book, Marketing Like We're Human, you know already, but I'm going to tell it to the audience here. I grew up in a hippie commune. So I grew up in a small community where my parents and some of their friends, they bought an apartment building together. And then we lived with these 6 families. We all had our separate apartments, but we spent a lot of time with these other people. Of course, us kids with the other kids, and the parents mainly with the parents. But it was like this community where all the decisions were made in common, parties were created in common, chores had to be decided in common. And so it really shaped who I am today. It shaped my values. All people, including my parents, were politically involved and, kind of like for human rights and more left wing, et cetera. But it really is this grounded upbringing that gave me the values that I have today. And what's funny is that for the longest time, I thought, well, none of this can be shared in the business world. I had to hide it away. It's like, well, this is embarrassing. I'm not going to share that. In my LinkedIn work back, my first business was a LinkedIn consulting business. And so I'm like, well, no, LinkedIn is very professional, so I can't share any of that. And then through me going through my own journey and coming back to, full circle in my story, I'm like, well, actually, this is who I am. And this is what made me who I am. And when I'm talking about humane marketing and the kind of marketing that my clients want to do, it is coming from that place of who are you? What are your values? What is your worldview? And so sharing that story became just very, very important. And so that's why I now usually start with that story.
Well, I love that you shared that story by way of introduction. And I wanted to share this with you because I really resonated with that story of yours in the book about growing up in a hippie commune, because my parents owned a bed and breakfast for 29 years, which was my entire childhood. So I grew up in a bed and breakfast, having people, as many as 30 to 40 people in my home year round for my entire childhood. And I have so many memories of sharing holidays with guests and holidays coming every year and becoming family, some of my closest friends. And so I resonated with that. And it also left me with the questions like, how has this informed my business? And I think there's a little bit more unpacking to do there for me, but something that resonated from your book and from our shared stories is just this emphasis on community, how important it is to our businesses. And also it sounds like it's become more a part of your offerings is a community element, and mine too. And I'm wondering kind of what motivated that shift.
Yeah, I think, again, it's just really understanding what I'm here to do. And yes, when I, first pivoted away from LinkedIn, from the LinkedIn business, into kind of zooming out again and saying, well, actually, I think what my calling is to bring a new way to market, coming from kindness and empathy. It's when I realized, well, actually, we can't do this alone. I can't do this in a silo. It was, as an introvert, I kind of done everything alone always for way too long. And so this coming full circle and realizing, wait a minute, I grew up in a community. That's exactly what I need to surround myself with. And that's what we need in order to create this humane marketing revolution. It's not about me just in a corner yelling revolution. It's about, bringing people together and saying, hey, we need to change the status quo. It's just no longer working for us. And so really tapping into like how I grew up and what I always knew was true. And yet over the last 20 years, that's not what we've seen in business.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to be a bit in the zeitgeist right now that, yes, okay, community is the new best thing. But to me, it was like, well, I always knew that this is what we need in order to create change.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, really just kind of feeling like I've always, like, when I grew up, we were a group of kids, right? So in this apartment building, and I was the eldest, and so I was always kind of the leader of this group, the gentle leader, if you want. And so it comes natural to me to be that host. I call myself the mama bear of the humane marketing circle, because I feel like, yeah, I'm, as a Capricorn, I'm responsible, right? I'm like, yeah, this is my group. These are my, baby bears. I need to take care of them. And yet it's not about me, it's about them. It's about us creating this change together. And so, yeah, I just love finding my way back to being in community. And it's absolutely.
And I love the piece about, humane marketing is not necessarily what we see. And I think one of the values of being in these values aligned communities is that we are seeing more of the ways of being that we are interested in approaching in our own businesses. And so not only are we modeling and normalizing and celebrating the successes of peers who are perhaps doing the very thing that we're wanting to see others succeeding in, having a successful experience with, which actually brings me to where I want to shift to, which is about, so in the beginning of your book, you talk about this idea that, so I'm based in Massachusetts, you're based in Switzerland, and you talk about how there's no European dream. There's the American dream, which, clearly influences the way we do so much of how we've done business, right? With our this hustle mentality and this grind culture that so many of us empathic entrepreneurs are trying to break free of and break free from. But you point so lovely to this idea that there really is no European dream. And so I guess I'm curious what your experience of marketing with empathy and humanity looks like differently, with perhaps in your own European perspective versus what you notice working with Americans, because I know you have a big influence here as well. So I guess I was just curious if you could speak to what you perceive and observe differently.
I think once a human being realizes, no matter where this human being comes from, realizes I want to do marketing or business with more empathy and kindness, at this point, it doesn't matter where they are, right? Whether they are in Massachusetts or Zurich in Switzerland, I think the values, we can all agree, these are the values we want to do, the place we want to do marketing from. However, I do see cultural differences. Like you said, there's the American dream. There's, capitalism is very much how success is defined in America. The further you go south in Europe, the less you have that kind of definition. And I sometimes point to my experience in Sicily, where my husband is originally from, and we have a place there where it's the opposite of capitalism. It's all about being in the moment and, also maybe being less ambitious and all of that, right? So the differences, or what I point to in this idea of, well, there's no European dream, is really how we define success. That, in my opinion, has been influenced by this American dream in the States, where over here, depending again where in Europe, the farther up north you go, the more the work ethic is more like in the States. It's like all about work, even though that's not true for the Nordic countries, strangely. If you look at Germany or Switzerland, it's very much, this work ethic. in definition of success. But again, if you go south of Italy or south of Spain, it's the opposite. And so, yeah, I really think it's that definition of success that we need to look at no matter where we are. And what I always also understand is the difference of systems. Like, even if you compare Canada and the States, Canada has a social system. It has a net where human beings are supported by this system. That doesn't exist in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the marketing is kind of or the marketing you see from the US is aligned with the system, which is lacking that social net, which is really, really important, because if you don't have a net, you don't have support, well, you're very quickly operating in scarcity rather than abundance. And so, in fact, it's very, we can understand much better why there's so much scarcity operating without a safety net, basically. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's beautifully said. And as you were sharing that, I was thinking, so I have family in Canada. That's where I was last month. And one of my very distant cousins was given a year of paid maternity leave when she had her first child. And that's just wild to me from my American perspective. That's so different. But I love what you said about scarcity mindset. And it actually, so I wanted to read this quote from your book because I think this, I would love for this to inform our conversation. So this is from your section that says goodbye to fear and manipulation, which feels similar to what you were just saying. So you say that when people buy out of fear, they feel disempowered. They buy because they feel pressure into buying, and they grasp at every solution presented to them. Unfortunately, they're also often paralyzed by their fear and therefore don't actually get the results you promise. That's frustrating to you and doesn't help your business grow, since only happy clients make for good referrals. Without referrals, you have to keep hustling and using the same fear-based short-term marketing methods. So using manipulation in marketing will get you cash in the door in the short run, but it will never help you create a sustainable business. Sarah, I love that quote. I think it is so beautifully said. And I think that's that scarcity mindset, which you were just speaking to, is one of the examples about how we sell from this kind of fearful place. So I'd love for you to paint us a picture of how can we do this differently? How can we defy the norms of what we see so often around us with this hype marketing approach and do it humanely?
Yeah. I think there's two things that kind of start the transformation. First of all, it's the awareness, realizing how much of this fear-based marketing really is out there, and really unpacking every time you see something that kind of gives you this tension in your heart, or you're in your belly and you're like, something's just not right. And as empaths and highly sensitive people, we know it. We have been so brainwashed to not pay attention to this feeling. So the awareness is really the first thing. And then saying, that's not okay. I don't want to be marketed to in this way, or I don't want to learn in this way anymore. Because unfortunately, and I say that in the book, I'm not pointing fingers because I raise my hand. I've been teaching some of these strategies as well, because that's all we've seen out there for the last 20 years, right? And so even the people who call themselves heart-centered or whatever, they will show you the marketing techniques that they have learned from some bigger guru, or even from the textbooks that we can find about marketing, where that's how it's taught, right? So again, awareness, and then saying it's not okay if I don't want to learn this way, or if I don't want to be on the receiving end anymore. and giving yourself permission to do it differently, even though it takes courage. And then the second thing is really kind of this inner work, really coming from within, and because we just said if there's no safety net, well, then we go into scarcity. So how can you ground yourself? You just came back from a yoga retreat that gives you this grounding. It's so much. When I looked at the successful people, those who were already doing or applying humane marketing strategies, it was always the people who first of all didn't yell the loudest. They just happily went on in their business. They were not the ones yelling how I made $1 million overnight, and they were the people who worked on themselves, who changed and continuously did personal development. So I think that is just as important as all the marketing tactics that we see out there. Really, that's why I say humane marketing is marketing that comes from within, because it takes that inner work also to be able to change how we define success for us. And that is probably not like the mainstream definition of success, with the 6 and 7 and 8 figure promises, right? And not always compare ourselves to everybody, but that takes time to look at and say, okay, I want to do it differently.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate the reminder that the inner work often looks like embracing our own humanity. And I think entrepreneurship is one of the greatest mindset hacks, mindset journeys that we all experience, and we don't knowingly sign up for. Right? And I think just reminding ourselves that, we all have fearful experiences. We all have fearful moments in our business when programs end and we have these dips in recurring income, or we have highs and lows in our business and seasonal ebbs and flows, and just kind of the very normal periods of expansion and contraction. And I think sometimes we forget to embrace that very human response. I remember one of my early coaching mentors when I was still finding my coaching feet, and I had a big gap, a big contraction in my business 1 month. And I had just increased my rates, and I felt really fearful around, I'm feeling so much scarcity. No one's going to pay my full rate. Like, what do I do? And she's like, Kat, just go handle your scandal and then get back to your high rates. And I so appreciated that reminder that when we're operating from a place of fear, we're not going to generate those embodied, powerful, same results as when we're operating from a grounded, stable place. So, for me in that moment, that looked like sharing some discounted rates to clients, getting my finances back in order, and then like getting back to playing a bigger game, but from this place of feeling safe and stable, and not fear provoked.
Yeah, that reminds me of a topic that we discussed in the circle recently, which is, especially right now this year, I hear it everywhere. Things are uncertain. People are maybe not spending as much money as they used to on coaching and things like that. And so, like I heard it several times just in the last few weeks that people were like, well, I needed to take on a part-time job. And I'm like, that's the best thing you did, because that gives you that safety, right? Because otherwise, first of all, you're not busy. And so you have too much time on your hands to be in this scarcity energy and constantly be in fear and think and hustle and think, oh, what else can I sell? And so that's not a good place to be in. But if you take, that time that you have at your hands right now, well, you get a part-time job, and it's not like, oh, you're giving up. It's just like, well, I need to be safe. I need to be able to pay my bills so that I even have that mental energy to, still work on my business part-time. So I think that permission slip for entrepreneurs to hear, no, it's not a failure to go back to a job, just even for a couple of months or half a year or even a year. It's not, it's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And that makes me think of another section of the book, which feels related. And you talk about that you share about how for many of us who identify as empaths, that a lot of our work is around receiving more. Mm-hmm. And you said maybe the old saying, give before you get, needs an update to receive to keep giving. And I host a monthly circle for my community called a non-networking power hour. And it's essentially just a free community ask and give circle where I bring together ambitious empaths and I invite them to ask for support, share what they're up to, what they're creating, where they're struggling, and ask for support and to make specific requests of my community. And then we go around and people share whatever it is they have to give. Advice, referral, collusion, empathy, a resource, a book, whatever. But I'm really wanting to model this point that you talk about, that we as empaths, so much of our work is around opening our arms and hands to receive better, to receive more in order to be able to keep giving from a filled cup without the burnout. And so I'd love for you to share, what does this look like in marketing?
Yeah. It's interesting because, again, one of the kind of mainstream things we hear is, give everything for free, and so that people realize how good you are, and then they hire you. However, I think for empaths, that is a risk, that we really give everything for free, and then there's nothing to be paid for anymore. And so I think for givers who are naturally givers, like empaths, it's finding that balance and understanding, no, I need to also take up space, and I need to be able to open to receive as well. So yes, I'm naturally giving information and blog posts and podcasts, but I'm doing it in a way that is, a friend of mine, Adam, he uses this term that I love. He calls it the smallest viable content plan. So instead of, because all we hear in the mainstream world is, more content, create lots of content and all of that. And so when he says the smallest viable content plan, it's like, well, yes, you want to be giving, but you can't give until you burn out, because that's what happened to me. It needs to be a smart kind of giving where you look at your resources and you say, okay, here's what I can give. But then, this is where it stops. And that's where I'm open to receive as well. So I think it's really important for empaths to understand until where they go in their giving, and then work on their receiving as well, and putting offers out there where they take up space and are open to receive.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think that's something I always notice with the empaths is when they make direct invitations or offers. And I'm always grateful to see it modeled. I'm always grateful to see other entrepreneurs like me inviting people to join their programs or sign up for this or whatever, because there's a reason we're in business, right? And so I really appreciate that.
I just thought of a term that I'm kind of borrowing from Jonathan Fields. He uses the term the maximum sustainable generosity. And I just love this term. And I use it often on my workshops when I say, kind of like, it's a reframe from a webinar. A webinar to me was this thing back, 10 years ago, where you sign up and then there's this long intro and then there's 10 minutes of content and then there's this long pitch. And it's like, oh, this is terrible. So I call them workshops for that reason. And then at the beginning, I say, look, we operate from this place of maximum sustainable generosity, meaning we're going to give you a lot of content in this 90 minutes. And I host these with collaboration partners, but we both run businesses. We are in business. And so that's why we're going to take 2 minutes at the beginning and present some next steps that, you can look at when we invite you to take a next step. And so when you do those things up front, rather than, everybody's waiting for it, at the end, there's going to be a pitch. And you present it in this way of maximum sustainable generosity, it just feels much better. It feels better to me. And I think it feels also better to the audience who's like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like, I think on the web, we've really trained everybody to think everything is free all the time. And I disagree. It's like, that's why so many people give up and burn out, because they're spending hours and hours creating content, creating podcasts, and they have nothing to show for at the end of their month. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm like, well, that is not the way I want to run the business. And I'm actually also a bit upset that some of these big gurus who have been there for a long time, who have now huge audiences and can sell their services or programs for like very little price, very low prices, they're still kind of, using that module and saying, oh, you have to create and create and give and give. And for empaths, that just means burnout. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I completely agree. I think so often for empaths, burnout looks like following someone else's script or doing business someone else's way. I think for empaths, being in business often looks like finding your own values-aligned approach, which I love. In your book, you talk about how you need to start with your definition of success. And I think that that's so very true, and really getting clear about what it looks like for you.
Right.
I loved the piece about taking a couple minutes at the beginning of your events to just share what's coming and just being super transparent about it. And I noticed that for empaths who are really trying to get more comfortable with sales, giving themselves permission to just be transparent, to be, I feel like authentic is so overused, but transparent, right? Like just be real, flat, that it makes it so much easier to make an invitation or share what you'd like to offer people, because you're doing it from a consensual place.
And what I've learned, it's also for neurodivergent people, where, we now know there's a lot more than we thought just 20 years ago. And so for that community, it's the same thing. And I know that with my clients as well. I call them, I tell them always, you're so much smarter than, people used to be 20 years ago. And with neurodivergent people, especially, they see through everything. So if you're not transparent with empaths or neurodivergent people, then, they're like, oh, this is false. So I can't trust that person. And especially with marketing, we've done so much damage with the way we have been marketing, with the manipulation and all of that we need to recover that trust. And it takes transparency. That's what it takes. Yeah.
We do need to recover that trust. In your book, you share a quote from Brené Brown: oversharing is not vulnerability. In fact, it often results in disconnection, distrust, and disengagement. And we have learned so deeply that we need to be vulnerable, and we use it as a tactic and a strategy and a ploy. And it's not real. It's not authentic. It's not human. And so I'd love for you to share, like, what is the humane approach? How do we be real and raw in an embodied way, in a real essence-based way? versus a marketing tactic?
Right. I really think it has to do with explaining a lot of how this marketing thing actually works. And so, what I mean by that is, for example, if you're offering an early bird to your subscribers, right? You're launching a program and you're offering an early bird. Well, the early bird offer per se is not a bad thing. It's not, it hasn't been invented to manipulate people. It has been invented, at least if it comes from a good intention, is because you want to know in advance who's interested in this program, and you're giving them, a better price for that reason. And so that needs to be explained. You don't have to say, oh, this early bird runs out tomorrow, and if you don't get it, well, you have missed out. And
10 emails later.
Yeah, and that's how we're taught how to use these early birds, right? But and it's with every tactic in marketing. It's like, if you explain it and if it comes from this good intention, then people, understand. Oh, yes, she's just running a business, and that's what is included, or that's what it takes. But it doesn't mean that every marketing tactic we see out there is necessarily bad. It's just the way we have been taught to use them that is often bad, or is often based in psychology. So whenever you see on a website, marketing strategies that are based in psychology, it's bad, because it comes from this thinking that we can tap into the psychology of people to trick them. It's always the idea of tricking them, right? And so that's what the conscious client doesn't want anymore. They don't want to be tricked. They still want to buy, but they don't want to be tricked. They want to be empowered to make a conscious decision. And that's how we need to adapt to our conscious clients with our marketing.
I don't think I had ever thought about it in that way. Like the idea that as conscious entrepreneurs, if we share our reasons for offering, whatever marketing practice we're employing, if we're just honest and we're willing to share our intentions or the reasons behind why we're doing it, others will understand. And also it gains trust.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Because then they just know, and it also helps to educate them about others where they did feel manipulated or kind of tricked. And so they're like, well, with Catherine, I felt like I could trust her, even though it's the same kind of marketing strategies, but it felt like, oh, she's talking to me like I'm a smart human, that I know these things. But in the other case, I feel like there's all this behind the scene that I'm not supposed to know, and I'm just supposed to take out my wallet and buy.
Yeah, it makes me think of integrity, and the idea that we really need to be in integrity with how we're operating our businesses. So I've been coaching for a decade, and the coaching industry has evolved so much over the past decade. And I notice that I will often get onto calls with people who have either worked with coaches before or have been sold to by other coaches. And then I'm apologizing. I'm apologizing on the behalf of my coaching colleagues who perhaps weren't trained, maybe did a weekend program or got trained in a month.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily follow the standards of the International Coaching Federation, and they don't embody the values and the integrity of a coach. And I think, I feel a lot of sadness for the coaching industry. I mean, I think there's so much potential, but I also feel a lot of sadness for so much of what you're speaking about of ways in which business owners are not being taught to market and to sell with empathy and integrity and their values.
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes back to what we started this conversation with which is, capitalism, which is the American dream of always going bigger and making more money. So if that is the intention behind all of the marketing that we do and just sell to whomever is there to buy, then it can't be humane. It can't be a human conversation with an ideal client, because you come from an intention to just make money no matter where this client is. You're not checking in with the client into their reality where they currently are. And that's probably some of these people that come to you and have been frustrated with other coaches before, because I think there needs to be this integrity to also say no, to say, like, actually, I don't think we're a good fit. And so, or maybe you're just not ready yet for that step, or maybe this other thing would serve you better. So having these human conversations, it's not what, the online marketing world has trained us to do at all. It was all about creating giant kingdoms of online sold programs and group coachings and all of that, and even coaching packages one-on-one. It's like, well, you have to, you do your numbers, and if you want to make 100K, well, you need 10K clients, and so just sell 10K programs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, okay, but is the value there for these 10K? A 10K program might be valuable for somebody who's already making 100 or 200K, but somebody who's just starting out making 10K per year, or maybe 20K, well, investing 10K in a coach is probably not the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have integrity, then you know that, because you're a smart, conscious human being, and you have to come up with a different definition of success, and probably say, well, I'm probably not supposed to be selling these 10K programs to beginners who are just starting out.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think of the coaching question that I ask many clients is like, what's enough? Like, what is your enough answer?
Right.
And I'm just like sensing how passionately we both feel about this topic. And I'm wondering, what are some of the switches or the shifts in your own business and how you do business that have evolved as a result of wanting to be human, wanting to be in integrity, wanting to be aligned with your own definition of success? Like, what's changed?
Yeah. I think that question, what's your enough, is like a really important starting point. And this idea also of, like, I think I wrote in the books, a journaling exercise I did, and I said, I never want I can't remember exactly, but my worth or happiness or feeling worthy be attached to how much money I'm making. Because that's what I kept feeling in the LinkedIn business. I kept feeling, well, if I am not making 100K yet, then I must not be, smart enough, important enough, business savvy enough, et cetera, et cetera. And so even when I reached 100K, I still didn't feel like, I felt like, oh, now I have to go higher and higher and higher, right? And so really, that definition of success, and going back to being just human and realizing, well, who are you if you are not doing what you're doing anymore? Who are you if you're just Catherine Wood, the human being, right? And really feeling grounded in that, and feeling enough in just being that human being, without your ambitions, without your calling in terms of work. And I think that's what's really shifted for me. It's like I'm spending much more time outside, because that is important to me. I started to walk a dog. I didn't want to own a dog, but I wanted to be in touch with animals. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go, and sit somebody else's dog or walk somebody else's dog, and things like that have shifted for me, where I'm like, I need actually more spaciousness than probably other beings who are not empaths, who are not highly sensitive, and really understanding. And that kind of comes in the 7 Ps of the humane marketing mandala, right? Where I do start with this personal power, finding out who you truly are, how you're wired. I mentioned I'm a Capricorn. I mentioned I'm an HSP. All these things that give us information about who we are help us then also create the business that is aligned with who we are, help us tap into our strengths and things that we can use in our marketing. And so, yeah, understanding all of that has totally shifted my idea of how I want to run my business. I only work with 3 one-on-one clients at a time, because that's just, I spend so much cognitive energy even outside of working with these clients, that's just how I want to work. And that, of course, means, well, redefining my definition of success, because I'm not gonna, be just increasing my rates endlessly and endlessly because I still want to make the same amount of money. So it's just like this whole rethinking of, well, what does it mean for me to wanting to be in business, wanting to make a difference, but not burning out at the same time? I think there's so much out there about, wanting to create a legacy or wanting to create change and helping other people. I've done that for so long that I came back to saying, well, who are the most important people in my life? They're my husband and my kids and my parents and my sister, right? Well, I want to spend time with them just as much, or probably more, than I want to spend time with clients whom I love dearly, but they're not my most important people. And so my business had to shift and say, okay, I need to prioritize that. And then not just those people, but myself. And so hence the walking in the woods and the dog and all of that.
I mean, I really hear that. And I also hear that sometimes that looks like taking really uncomfortable decisions on some levels in service of your most important values and commitments. This summer, I pulled back from business a lot, and I also shrunk I had some clients complete in the spring, and I decided not to replace those spots all summer. And on some levels, it was uncomfortable for me having a smaller paycheck. And then I had to reevaluate, like, why is this actually uncomfortable for me? Why do I really care about this? And it was just totally that egoic part of me that cared. That part of me that is still struggling with my own internal capitalism, still struggling with not continually increasing, continually earning more and more and higher and higher. But in reality, at the end of the day, like, I was most committed to spending time with my family and my friends and my dogs and being in nature and by the ocean. And so when I could just recenter in what am I most committed to here, it quieted all the noise.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're so right. It always comes back to the ego, or very often, right? Well, first comes safety, like we said. Sometimes it depends where we are in our journey, right? So obviously, if you can't cover basic needs, then it sounds like very snobby to say, well, I am only working with 3 clients. And so it's always important to first cover basic needs. But then once you're at that stage where you're like, well, I have enough. I cover my basic needs. Is it really the needs, or is it my ego, or is it capitalism that just pushes me constantly to do more? And it's actually also society that is kind of still frowning upon, well, why are you not working, Sarah? Why are you walking, in the forest during the day when everybody else is working? So all these kind of like thoughts in our head, and like, well, yeah, you should be working 8 hours per day. But wait a minute, I went into business so I could have more freedom. And it's like, yeah, but you still should be working, right? It's like this constant in our head.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it is such a mindset shift, right? Like the 9 to 5 mindset to the CEO mindset, realizing that the freedom you went into business to gain is the same freedom that you need to learn how to protect and sustain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm mindful of the time. And as we wrap up here, I guess I wanted to end on the power of language, because something I think I sense about you is how important the words that you choose to use are, and how you name things. And one of the questions that you sent over, which I'm dying to hear more about what this means, is the term the gentle sales conversation in our serene garden. And also you rename a sales funnel to a sales path. And I'd love for you to perhaps end us today, like talking about, first of all, what those terms are, but also why the renaming of them is so important to you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll actually start with the language and why it's so important to you, to me, to you should be too.
It is.
So language really, well, maybe I never thought of that actually, but I speak 5 languages fluently. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why language to me is important. I can, I turn into different characters when I speak different languages. Here, where I live in Lausanne, Switzerland, I speak French with my friends. With my parents, I speak Swiss German. With when I'm in Sicily, I speak Italian, and with clients, and so I speak English. And so I think, yeah, language is important to me. But then also, what really resonated with me when I was doing my research for the Marketing Like We're Human book is this book by Jeffrey Shaw called Lingo. It's a really, really good read because he writes about the importance of language for your ideal clients. And so I was like, yeah, that really makes sense how you speak. And of course, also in the written language, it really either resonates with your ideal clients or it doesn't. And so that really made sense to me. And then I started to look at the marketing language and all the terms that we just take for granted and think, well, this is just how marketing is supposed to sound. And if you think of target audience and leads and the tripwire, all these terms that are, first of all, very manly, very yang energy. Some of them come from the military language, some of them from the sports language, but they're very aggressive. And so people like us, like empaths, highly sensitive people, well, we sense that. Like I feel aggressed when I read that kind of language. And so I really do feel like, well, if we change marketing, we also need to change our language. And that's why instead of the funnel, where if you just visualize this funnel, well, it means like we're squishing everybody through the same funnel. And so we're not empowering them at all. We're disempowering them. We're treating them like cattle go through the same funnel, right? So I'm like, well, that doesn't resonate with my people, and it doesn't resonate with all the heart-centered entrepreneurs, I would say. And so changing that to a gentle sales path where it feels like, oh, I'm empowered. I can be on this path. I can exit this path. I can pause on this path. And, it's like I'm the one who's in power. And it's the same with the gentle sales conversation in the serene garden, where it feels like I'm sitting down with my ideal client. I'm having tea and I'm just having this human conversation where we can be transparent and say, look, Sarah, I don't actually have the money right now. Can we talk about this? Is there a way that, what people usually know is the payment plan. So they usually say, is there a payment plan? And then they expect, this payment plan to come with like this interest and it's going to be much more. So they're already afraid about that. And I'm like, no, let's just have a human conversation. I hear you and I really want to work with you as well. And let's find a way, I really think it's this idea of, if we come from integrity and we both want the best for each other, then there will be a way. And it's based on trust. Recently, what I've started doing is when I have these payment plans that are kind of longer than the usual payment plan, I'll just say, would you be okay to sign a trust agreement? Where I just kind of created a little Word document and say, we both want to sleep well at night and we both have our best interest at heart. Let's sign this trust agreement. And it works beautifully because they know that they're now a responsible, conscious human being who owes me that money in exchange for that trust that we have established.
Right. I'm so glad I asked that question. And I love that language, like a gentle sales conversation in our serene garden. Like it's so visual. And even just embodying yourself, being in a serene garden while you have a sales conversation with a cup of tea, like it changes the whole energy of the call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, this has been so wonderful. I'm so glad that not only rescheduled from last week when I was at the yoga retreat, but you've been in my world for many years now. So I've been knowing I would connect with you at some point. So it's really lovely having you. And I ask all of my guests as the closing question, what has supported you in becoming a prosperous empath?
Yeah, thank you. So many different things I would say, and I think I kind of list them at the end of the Marketing Like We're Human book, because again, it's this transformation that we need to go through, right? And so one thing that comes up for me right now is yoga nidra. I can't go through my days anymore without having my half-hour yoga nidra pause at lunch and just kind of like totally relax and be silent. And yeah, meditation is kind of challenging for me. So I'm like, well, who says I have to do meditation? I can find a different thing that works for me. And yoga nidra is that thing. It's not so much about the concentrated emptying our mind, but it's just about the deep relaxation of the body. And yeah, I find that very supportive right now.
Well, I love that. Sarah, thank you so much. It's been so lovely to have you. And I know what my audience is going to just love our conversation.
Thanks so much, Kat. Yeah, it was a delight to talk to you.
Just popping in here once more to remind you that if you enjoyed today's conversation and would love to get your hands on a free copy of Sarah's amazing book, Marketing Like We're Human, you still have time to join the book giveaway. All you have to do is head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review for the Prosperous Empath, and then send us a DM over on Instagram or email us with your Apple username so we know to look out for it once it's been verified. You have until Monday, September 25th at 12 noon Eastern Time, and then we'll notify the winner and send you a copy of the book. Good luck! Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath Podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode, and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.